I've been getting a lot of questions on how I tie my drift rigs, so I'm going to show you how I do a three-way drift rig, which is personally what I use all the time if I'm drifting on the bottom. This is 60-pound monofilament leader, this Berkeley Big Game, and the length of the leader just depends on how far you want your bait up off the bottom. I don't do any certain length. I mix it up. I'm going to do this one a little bit longer. That's about the longest that I usually do. I don't go above 3 or 4 foot most of the time. Let's cut that, and this is a 9/0 circle hook. It does not come offset, so what I do, these are thin wire hooks which work fine where I'm fishing, but I give it a little offset, and that tends to help get better hook sets for me. And then I snell it on. And this is the way I do it. There's plenty of different ways. Just give it some wraps. Make sure you wrap it tight each time. Make sure they're tight against each other. And pinch it. And always make sure whatever you do when you end your snell, come back through the back and through the front of the eye on the hook. And then pull it tight. Then I take, this is a 3-inch peg float. So I use 2-inch, 2.5, and 3. Just depends on the bait size. A lot of times when you get these cheap peg floats, which is what I use for drifting, they don't have a hole in the middle when you get them. So what I do is always keep a small screwdriver or something to poke a hole. So keep that in my tackle bag and just pull the peg out. Run your line through, and you can play around with how far up the leader you run it. If you're using a giant bait, you can move it closer to your hook and it'll float a little better. But most of the time, that's how I run mine. Then I come down about, 7 or 8 inches or so, and I cut my main leader there. Do that so I can tie in a ball chain swivel, which prevents a lot of twisting when you're drifting. Then I take the piece that I just cut off the main leader, tie that on the top to join it back together. And as I said, that's just to help prevent more twist. And you can trim that up too. No big deal either way. I use these a little bit different than a traditional 3-way swivel. It's 2 1-way swivels put together, and to me they just seem to do better on these drift rigs. The way I do it, I always run my main line to the very top. I'll have a weight coming off the bottom, but I make sure I put my hook leader off the side right here. Okay, so now you've got that. This is just some cheap 15-pound monofilament. This is going to be for the weight. I use 15-pound on that because my main line is 30 and my hook leader 60. The 15 is enough to hold it under some pretty good pressure, but if you get snagged to the point where you have to break something off, you break off your weight instead of your hook or your main line. So just tie that one end of that 15-pound line on, That's 1.5 ounces, one of my signature slinky weights. And then you run that through the bottom of that swivel. Tie that on. And usually, you know, I run the length of that weight leader, usually get it somewhat in line with this chain swivel. And from what I've noticed, it just is another thing to help avoid tangles when you have that swivel lined up with your weight. But now you would just tie your main line. I've got all my stuff out now, so I'm not going to tie this on, but this will be an extra rig for when I get hung up at some point. But I'll just tie my main line onto the top of that three-way. And when you're pulling this through the water, you have your slinky weight making contact with the bottom the whole time. And this peg float will hold your bait up off the bottom, you know, 2 or 3 feet. Depends on the length of your leader. And that's pretty much it. That's all there is to it. That's what I use all the time if I'm drifting on the bottom, is this rig here. Planer boards, without planers, shallow or deep. That's it.